So we're going to try and graph y. I want to do 2 pi over b. What is b in this case? 3. Okay, so that is the period. That is how long it's going to take for me to do one full cycle. 2 pi over 3. Inconvenient because it's not such a nice number, right? It's nice when it's 2 pi, 4 pi. All right, well, whatever. 2 pi over 3, that is how long it's going to require me to make one full cycle. Okay, so now I need to find the other points. So let's find the midpoint. Okay, so my starting point is always 0. So I'm going to do 0 plus 2 pi over 3, but then I want half of that. Okay, well, that's the same thing. 0 plus 2 pi over 3 is just 2 pi over 3. And then instead of dividing by 2, I'll multiply by a half. So it looks like my midpoint is actually, what's that become? 2 pi over 6, which is really pi over 3. So there's my midpoint. So there's another important point. So there's my period midpoint. Now we need to find these quarter points. So I need to find halfway between 0 and my midpoint, pi over 3. And then I also need to find halfway between my midpoint and my end, right? So I'll add the two together and take half of each set. Okay? So quarter points. So the first one, starting point, which is 0, and then the midpoint. I'm going to add the two together and divide by 2. So that's the same thing as pi over 3 times a half, or pi over 6. There's my first quarter point. And then I just have to do it one more time from the midpoint to my end point, the full period. I want halfway between those two numbers. So I'm going to add them together, pi over 3 plus 2 pi over 3, and I want to take half of that, right? Divide by 2, or I'll just multiply by a half like that. So what's pi over 3 plus 2 pi over 3? 3 pi over 3, which is really just pi, and then pi times a half, just pi over 2. Does that make sense? It's weird to find though, but once you get the hang of it, so you find your period, and then halfway between those two, and then halfway between those two. Okay, so now my amplitude has not changed, so I'm still just fluctuating between positive 1 and negative 1. It's just my period that has now shifted. Okay, so I'll go ahead and I'll draw my axes, and this time I know where I need to place my points. So after the origin, the first point is at pi over 6. My next point will be the midpoint, right? Pi over 3. The third quarter point is pi over 2, and the whole thing is going to end at 2 pi over 3. Okay, and we're doing a sine, oh yeah, same thing on the negative, sorry. Go up to a positive 1 and down to a negative 1. Oops, thought I missed it. Okay, and then I'm doing a sine curve, so I'm going to start where? Where does sine start? 0, yep. And then just like the other one, I'm going to go up my midpoint, I hit the x-axis again, come down, and hit it back again.